they went to the queen to tell her subjects had no bread. Do you know what she said?
Let them eat cake.
Who took the bomb?
We're getting screwed, man. Every time we turn around, we're getting screwed. Oh, the revolution's going to be through podcasting for sure. That's the only way we talk. It's the little guys that take the brunt of everything. It's got to stop. Peasants, man. We're just peasants. Every one of us. You watch those old movies, you see the peasants in the background with the kings and queens walking around. We're those people. We're those people. Good morning, peasants. Welcome to another episode of The Peasant's Perspective. I am flying solo again today. I don't know where my co-host is. I imagine he's probably laid up in bed, not feeling too well. All right, you guys have joined us today. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Ponyboy, you're already in the chats. Good morning. Carlite's supposed to get another Arctic front in the future soon. Those boys are from Texas. And when an Arctic front runs through Texas, you know there's trouble because they don't know how to deal with cold weather. And that's just the truth of the matter. You know, it was interesting when I was up in Wisconsin at one point in the car, it was negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, which, by the way, for those of you from Texas, is very cold even for Wisconsin. So anyways, interesting, you guys. You guys will probably get a nice low down at like 25, which is nothing for most of America. All right, guys, we've got enough of you in here. Let's go ahead and do the simultaneous sip. I know why you're here. You're here for the simultaneous sip. All you need is a cup, a mug, or a glass, or a tankard, a chalice, or a stein, a canteen, jug, or flask, a vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I like beverage, some like tea, some like water. And join me now for the unparalleled pleasure, the dopamine hit of the day, and the thing that makes everything better, the simultaneous sip. All right, it's good to get that out of the way. I can't believe we missed that for a couple days. All right, let's see. Colonel Impa, Karen, good morning. Agree. Even though Florida passed legislation against geoengineering, they are spraying here more than ever. Wake up to chemical smell in the morning air. Ooh, that's no fun. You know what? When I was flying over the country, Seattle to Wisconsin, at one point, you're up there and there was a chemtrail that we flew over. And it was like this long, it's exactly what you'd expect. It was like an exhaust trail that was just kind of hanging out in the air, but it was clearly exhaust or, like just this long string. I couldn't see the plane on the other end. I couldn't see where it began or it end, but it was just kind of hanging there and we flew over it. Anyways, I thought that was very odd. It was clearly something. Carlitos, good morning, Pony Boy. We are in Houston, you in Dallas. And he says, West Texas, San Angelino. And very cool. It's cool that you guys are all getting to know each other in the chats. That's the whole point, right? Build some community, have some fun. All right. So yesterday was a really big day, election-wise, and holy smokes, man, the overreaction to getting a hold of the physical ballots. You'd think guys had something to hide or cover up. But aside from that, we did have another big piece of news that broke just this morning, literally minutes before I walked in the studio. Breaking, and this is coming from the Patriot Oasis, but it's been posted a million other places. Breaking in a press release, Don Lemon's attorney, Abe Lau, who's Abe Lau? Lau, it's not Lau, it's Lowell. Who's Abe Lowell? Abe Lowell was the attorney for Hunter Biden. Abe Lowell was the attorney for Lisa Cook, the Fed governor. Abe Lowell was the attorney for the fired CDC deputy director or whatever it was. Abe Lowell is the guy that all these scorned Democrats, these people that are essentially, I don't know how to describe them other than sycophants, end up having as their attorney. So he's kind of a dirtbag attorney. Anyways, Don Lemon got arrested and they put out a statement. Basically, Abe Lowell's like, oh, this is because of First Amendment protesting. Right. Yeah, remember the names exactly. When you see Abe Lau or Lowell on anything, you know that it's a TDS patient that is seeking legal representation. And they're going to try to use their TDS as the justification for whatever they're doing. So pretty interesting there. I'm not even shocked in the slightest that Don Lemon has him as an attorney, but they did pass down an actual federal indictment. So it's not just a complaint that's then taken and filed, and then he's brought before a judge, and then there's a probable cause hearing. Nope. There's no need for a probable cause hearing or an evidentiary hearing. This is pretty straightforward. They went to a grand jury, which consists of 12 to 16 people. They voted on the evidence that they saw. It's a one-sided deal. Only the prosecution gets to present evidence. And the jury returned a true bill, essentially saying they saw enough evidence that they think that Don Lemon should be charged with a public crime. And he was. And so indictments are sticky. Judges don't just dismiss them. They don't get a chance to dismiss them. Judges don't get to see the evidence until you're getting towards the jury trial. And they can exclude evidence and things like that, but they typically don't just dismiss indictments. So that is a big, big, big deal. So watch Don Lemon make the media tour, watch them. They have, in my opinion, they have no other choice but to try to make, to plead their case in the public. That's what they're going to have to do. They have no other choice but to do that. All right. Ari Hoffman reports this, and this has happened yesterday in a Seattle courtroom. Seattle has to pay $30 million for allowing BLM and Antifa to take over 6 blocks of the city in 2020. This was known as the Chaz Chop Zone. Chaz, it was the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, and then it became the Capitol Hill something, whatever. They changed the name because the city was like, hey, you can't be autonomous. You have to be an occupied place, or I don't know. They came up with some other name, but it was Chaz and or Chop, depending on what week we were running headlines. So the jury returned the indictment and awarded the family $30 million.
The state of, in the Superior Court of Seattle, in the Superior Court of the state of Washington in Fulton County, the state of Antonio Mays Jr., and the personal representative of the state of Antonio Mays Jr. and Antonio Mays.
Anyways, it's very quiet there, but the family was awarded $30 million and found the city of Seattle essentially negligent by not providing city services. And this was the discussion we had all the way back in 2020, was just that. The people that live in that community were held hostage by the Chaz Chop occupiers, right? They would force them to open their windows and their doors and run extension cords out into the park. They would force them to basically provide food and things out of their refrigerator, fresh water. Those individuals inside of that Chaz Chop zone were unable to get any kind of first responder services. The police wouldn't respond. 9/11 wouldn't respond. And so then the question became, what are we paying taxes for? Should we just redirect them over to the Chaz warlord? This was a real discussion happening in Seattle over this Chaz Chop Zone. It was a really big deal. And they found him guilty of negligence, $30 million. Now, this pales in comparison to, say, the settlement that the Babbitt family got for Ashley Babbitt's wrongful death. Is that not the same situation? Was that not negligence on the part of Muriel Bowser and Ashley Babbitt and the Capitol Hill Police to not pass on intelligence showing that it was going to be wild that day at the Capitol? Yeah, I just think, life's not always fair, but at least here there's something. The city is taking the blame for that, and rightly so. It was not the summer of love. Another thing that happened yesterday that there are these people, these certain particular politicians that are nothing but designated liars. These are people that have no allegiance to the truth. They have no North Star. They have no compass whatsoever. And this is one of those individuals. His name is Senator Dick Durbin. You guys have all heard about him. And yesterday he went onto the Senate floor.
This weekend, federal agents.
Yesterday he went onto the Senate floor to talk about the shooting in Minneapolis by the Border Patrol agents or ICE agents. I don't even know which one. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Right, this gentleman Pretty that was shot. So Dick Durbin is on the Senate floor. Let's go ahead and watch this video. It's pretty significant what he did this day. This is another one of those retarded things that's going to go down in history, just proving how feckless and retarded our elected leaders can sometimes be.
This weekend, federal agents gunned down yet another American in Minneapolis, Alex Pretty, a 37-year-old ICU nurse at a VA hospital in Minneapolis. I'm going to show a photo of that scene, which is graphic, but I'm afraid is necessary to appreciate the horror of the moment. This photo shows the last second before the ICE agent killed Alex Preddy on the streets of Minneapolis.
What's really incredible here is the ICE agent, has this loaded gun right at the back of Preddy's head. This is a terrifying shot, except there's one thing missing. Apparently Alex Preddy had already decapitated this officer. Where's his head? Where is the brain? Where are the eyes, the nose, the scalp, the hair of this officer right here? This is an AI-generated photo that made its way around X. The officer is missing his head. This officer right here is holding his head down over where this officer's neck should be. This is the United States Senate. This man has been elected. This man is a retard. This man cannot see. I wonder if standing here in the well of the Senate, the most sacred of places that the QAnon shaman violated, as he posts this picture, this AI-generated picture, this graphic picture that Americans just must see. Yeah, it's graphic. A guy's missing his head. If Preddy chopped off this Border Patrol agent's head, then I think this might have been a justified shooting, Dick Durbin.
In his right hand is his camera, left hand holding the ground. No gun, obvious. No effort to resist, obvious. This was a moment when this man lost his life.
Is it, Dick Durbin? Is this the moment that this man lost his life?
He was characterized afterwards as an assassin, a domestic terrorist. The photo tells the story.
Does it? Does the photo tell the story? That's credit of Breitbart for posting that. Do you not get it yet? Do the American people not see it? These people are fools, and they will bold-faced lie to you. Now, mistakes can be made. Dick Durbin can be like, oh, my staff, printed that poster. Clearly, they printed the poster. Did they not look at it? Maybe you should fire your staff. Dick Durbin, that is the most embarrassing thing I have ever seen. And I just want you to know this is not new. Jacob Chansley, I mentioned the QAnon shaman just to bring this all together. When Jacob Chansley was indicted by the United States government, in his criminal complaint, they had a picture of him inside of the United States Capitol. And superimposed on one of the pieces of artwork in the background, presumably, a portrait of one of our founding fathers, was a portrait of a porn star with his pants off, showing himself in all of his glory. This was included in the criminal complaint put before a grand jury, judges in the world, as evidence that Jacob Chansley was inside the United States Capitol. A photoshopped picture showing a porn star as artwork in the Capitol building. So, yeah, if you think the government dots their I's, cross their T's, never falls victim to fake news, you're wrong. Which is partly why it is so insidious, the fact that the fourth branch of government, the free press, allegedly, right, buys into these lies and pushes these narratives. You go all the way back to the start of all the drama with Donald Trump, right when he came down the escalator, the Russiagate narrative. That information was laundered into the press, false information laundered into the press and spoon-fed back to the American people as slop. Just like these AI images, just like the government, the executive branch of government is willing to feed, and clearly the legislative branch of government is willing to feed the American people slop. Untruths, provable untruths, on their face, stupid prima facie fictions, like AI-generated images being showed in the well of a ballot or submitted as courtroom evidence or published as fact that Trump is a Russian agent because of some laundered information into the Department of Justice and into the news ecosystem. It is disgusting what happens. So now we're going to shift focus back to the election stuff, this FBI raid in Fulton County. And we're going to take the time to pick apart some of the different perspectives that the left and the right have on this. Because as I've emphasized many times, facts do not win wars, narratives do. It's what the people believe that matters. And sometimes people believe things that are not true. And that false belief and that false illusion has so much power and so much force, it causes people to act differently. For example, not supporting a president or not supporting good policy because your empathy has been tickled by some false news or something like that. So here's an example dealing with the 2020 election where people pick sides and then everything becomes confirmation bias. Either it's confirmed that you saw cheating or it's confirmed that there is no cheating and Donald Trump is just an idiot. So let's listen to a couple of these news reports over the 2020 election ballots being seized by the Federal Bureau of Investigations. And listen to the little subtle keywords, the false claims, the Donald Trump is still denying the results of the election, and all these different things, these buzzwords that the mainstream media and those that don't want to at least get to the facts are trying to spin out there for you. So the first one I got for you is coming from Reuters News. Now, Reuters, obviously a big mainstream news network, and Reuters, has a huge amount of influence. They're considered very credible. Listen to how they just cover in their little news clip the raid on the Fulton County ballots.
The FBI searched an election office in Georgia's Fulton County outside Atlanta on Wednesday, pursuing U.S. President Donald Trump's false claims that his 2020 election defeat was because of widespread voting fraud. An FBI statement said its agents executed a warrant at the Fulton County Election Hub and Operations Center. A law enforcement official who spoke to Reuters said the agents were looking to seize computers and ballots they believed were held at the facility as part of an investigation into possible election interference. Trump unsuccessfully sought to overturn the 2020 election result in Georgia, pressuring the state's top election official to, quote, find votes that would allow him to claim victory. Several reviews and a hand audit of ballots confirmed that Democrat Joe Biden narrowly won the state. Wednesday's search came a week after Trump again made his debunked claim that voting in 2020 was a rigged election, and that, quote, people will soon be prosecuted for what they did. The director of the FBI, Kash Patel, was appointed to his post by Trump last year.
So you can see there the little subtle keywords, the false claims of election denial, right? That's Reuters. That's just, they've got the script and they're going to run with the script. So this is all Trump just trying to adjudicate the past, okay? So now let's jump over to Europe. On LBC, Jen, you probably know these guys. On LBC, they had a discussion about this. Again, it's important the way they present this because there's something called the law of first impression, right? You can't take back a first impression. Excuse me, it's not the law of first impression. It's called the law of primacy. Your first impression of something is the impression that sticks. Because in order to change your opinion, you have to be presented with more compelling evidence than what created that first impression. It's called the law of primacy. Your first exposure to a thing is typically going to be your primary operating system or opinion on a certain matter. So now, people who have TDS, they're watching this, and this is their reaction to what they saw in the raid yesterday.
Donald Trump conclusively lost the state of Georgia in 2020.
And he's never accepted that.
He's never accepted that. But in the last 24 hours, he has sent in the FBI to raid these election offices. And we just spoke to Mo Ivory, who is the Fulton County Commissioner. And she described to us in absolute graphic detail how FBI agents came with a warrant. They got the wrong warrant, first of all. She sent them away. They came back with another warrant. And they took away the boxes that have been stored in the cellars, in the archives of all these American votes. They've all been taken away. They've all been taken away on these great big pallets. They've literally been physically removed. So it's not a question of like, oh, can we just see the data or can we see that, downloaded sort of numbers or can we check the graph or whatever. They've literally removed the votes themselves on a great big pallet. And I asked the Commissioner Ivory, do you have confidence that these won't now be tampered with? And she said none at all. Her concern is, this is not really about 2020. This is not about the past. This is about the future. And if Donald Trump can sow the seeds of a sense of confusion or a sense of chaos or a sense that the election officials don't know what they're doing.
Your democratic process cannot be trusted. Let's not bother having one.
Where have we seen that? In Russia, right? This is an old Putin tactic. You don't actually have to tell people things. You just have to make them feel that the systems aren't working or they're somehow not right. This is not about party politics. This is about having somebody at the very top of government who has no real concern for the democratic rights of the voter in America.
Is that the case? This is someone at the top of the party who has no concern for the rights of the voter in America. Is that how you perceive it? It probably isn't if you're listening to the show, right? Because you're probably conservative if you're willing to sit and listen to me rant and ramble all day long. But this is how they feel about it. They feel like Trump is somehow stealing votes. That why would he need the physical evidence? Because now we can't continue to prove recount after recount of these fake ballots, right? That Biden won the election and Ossoff won the runoff and all these different people that Georgia has given us the last 4 years. This is really scary because remember, it's not facts, it's narratives. These people don't want to see the ballots. They want to have agreement. They want to have uniformity. This is the collectivist desire. We're all in it together. Are we? Are we all in it together? Right? When someone asks for your last meal for the group to sacrifice yourself, you can just turn it around and say, how about I have your last meal and give it to me? And then that's where the individualism comes in. It's when everybody's fighting over the last resources that it breaks down. The more people participate in communism, there's like a growth curve. These people just want everybody to agree. They hate the freedom of speech. They hate facts because they spin narratives. That's all they do. They spin narratives. Right? And their narratives, which on the right, we have narratives too, but typically they're aligned with reality because it's easier to do that. It's harder to live a lie than it is to live by truth, right? These guys have so many plates spinning and so many lies they have to keep up. And the only way that you can enforce a lie is with force. And so you end up putting people like me in jail. You end up putting different dissidents in jail. We see this around other countries. This is what the Biden regime did. They wouldn't validate people's concerns. Rather, they persecuted and prosecuted them for expressing the concerns. Here's Chris Chileza, a liberal pundit, I guess you could say. He's probably in the same category of me on the right. But again, narratives over facts, narratives over facts. This is what the other side of the aisle, the other side of the political spectrum this morning is waking up, and this is what they're sharing with each other. So just like we're over here clapping the ballots being taken, they're over there fomenting something completely different.
And yet, here we are, as I said, almost 2,000 days after the 2020 election. After Donald Trump has already won another presidential election, he cannot give up the idea that he actually won in 2020, which, by the way, even if he did win Georgia, which he didn't, he still would have lost by a significant margin. And that's, I don't really know what to say. It's sad in a way that a guy who's in his second term as president an adult, a 79-year-old man, can't accept the fact that he lost an election and has to use the powers of the federal government to try to continue to litigate this. But it's also a little scary. And I think you should pay attention to it because there's no there. There's no evidence. There's no reasonable doubt that this election was decided in the proper way with the proper ballot count. And yet, here we are, as I said, almost 2,000 days after the 2020 election. After Donald Trump has already won another presidential election, he cannot give up the idea that he actually won in 2020, which, by the way, even if he did win Georgia, which he didn't, he still would have lost by a significant margin. And that's, I don't really know what to say. It's sad in a way that a guy who's in his second term as president an adult, a 79-year-old man, can't accept the fact that he lost.
Did I play that twice? I feel like I played that twice. I turned my head for a second and it looped. But you can see they're pinning it on this, Donald Trump's just a sore loser and he can't just take the win that he got by winning the 2024 election. He's got to go punish his enemies. Well, he might want some retribution and vindication. It's probably more vindication than anything, right? That his suspicions weren't wrong all along. This is the chairman of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners, and he has defended the authenticity of the 2020 election for years now. Okay, this is one of the guys, whether he's in on the steal or not, he is absolutely involved in the cover-up. Okay, whether he's in on the steal or not, he's in on the cover-up. problem was easy. I just had to unmute myself. Well, yep, glad we're back. Yeah, this clearly is not a show produced by AI or with any kind of massive budget with producers laying all over the place, because it's a one-man band in here. You guys, yesterday's show, I got some feedback from yesterday's show. I heard yesterday's show was pretty good. I need you guys to understand how yesterday went down. So I get into the studio. I try to get in here like 5:50, 6 o'clock. And that gives me 30 minutes to open all the tabs and get all the different mic. Okay, thank you. So that gives me a chance to open all my tabs and kind of get the show organized and how it's going to flow. And I don't have notes or anything. So to me, it's an extemporaneous narrative that I go through the show. So this all happens kind of off the top of my brain as I go through the clips. And so yesterday I prepped all the show, and I fully expected Ron to be here. And I got a message that he wasn't going to be here. Oh, I wasn't. Take that back. I wasn't prepping the show. I was driving here. I got a message from Ron indicating that he wasn't going to be here. And I didn't bring, so when I do this by myself, I can't use all the studio cameras because that's all set up through Ron's computer. So I have to use like a webcam, and I basically have to run it on my own in my computer the same way I would do it if I was broadcasting from my home studio. So I didn't bring the webcam yesterday because I expected Ron to be here. So I was like, oh crap, I'll stop at Walmart. They're open 24 hours. So I stopped at Walmart, and I was 10 minutes early to Walmart, and it actually opens at 6 a.m. now. Apparently after COVID, they stopped doing the 24 hours a day thing and never went back. So I had to run into Walmart, wait for them to open at 6, run in there, buy a webcam, get back, drive the other 20 minutes to Ron's house. So I got here at about 6:23, something like that. Got the whole setup set up. I switched everything over, got the camera in, got the show prepped. And I was 1 or 2 or 3 minutes late launching live, but that entire show was set up, prepped, and start to finish in like 5 or 6 or 7 minutes. All the tabs, everything. I was just throwing them up. So I was actually like, hey, the show ended up pretty good when it was all said and done. I thought it was going to be kind of a train wreck, but it ended up being pretty good. So I don't know, maybe I should prepare less, and it ends up being better. All right, looks like we've got the bulk of you guys back in here. Thank you so much for coming back in. I really, really appreciate it. And since I got you guys here and you're a captive audience, let's get started with a pitch for coffee. We did the simultaneous sip earlier, but let's talk about what you can throw in that cup for the simultaneous sip. If you still haven't tried 1775 coffee, now's your shot. The 1775 starter kit just dropped only 1,000 units. You're getting the bold, dark roast that hits hard, the smooth, medium roast, and the Vitali mushroom coffee for clean energy and laser focus, no crash. All single origin, small batch, toxin-free and mold-free. Plus, you're also getting a gold spoon clip because freedom isn't scooped with plastic, a frother strong enough to stir up your coffee and your mother-in-law's opinions, and a black 1775 tumbler. $170 worth of coffee and gear, yours for $99. This is for the ones who've been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble, wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler alert, it is. Go to 1775coffee/studio and grab your starter kit before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something just like Rumble does. All right, guys. Yeah, go try that coffee. It's really good. Okay, let's jump back over here. Appreciate you guys sticking around. So this is on CNN, and I played a clip prior that you guys probably missed. I closed the tab. Sorry. It was the Fulton County Board of Commissioner that was like, I can't believe these guys got the ballot. We've counted them so many times. Everybody who's honest is going to find out that Donald Trump lost that election. Yeah, fat chance. We'll see how that goes. So this is one of the names that we have to remember in all of this narrative, Andrew McCabe. Andrew McCabe is now a pundit at CNN. It's where he went after he, was unceremoniously fired from CNN or from FBI. And he has one major concern. Now, remember, he's the deputy director of the FBI. He probably has some confidence with some holdbacks in the FBI that, who knows, maybe they'll protect things, that this is just a cover up. Get a hold of the ballots and it'll be a cover up. That way it doesn't end up being exposed through litigation, which was maybe going to happen, right? Maybe through the normal litigation process, we were going to see these ballots. That's why they had been preserved in the first place. So let's hear what Andrew McCabe has to say, because he's big scared about one thing, and that's that Tulsi Gabbard was involved in this.
One of the oddest moments about this raid, and there are many, as John was just laying out the history here, is the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was on the ground. Why would she need to be there?
Well, Phil, that is just one of the many questions we have without answers right now. But in short, she has no reason to be there. If you look at the Homeland Security Act of 2002, which created the position of the Director of National Intelligence in the way that we now know it, the DNI, as we call them, has no operational role, not in intelligence and certainly not in domestic law enforcement. So there is no legitimate reason why Tulsi Gabbard should have been there. Would she have seen any intelligence if produced from this search? Eventually, certainly, but she has no role in executing a search warrant.
She has no role in executing the search warrant, but clearly she was there. She has no role in executing the search warrant. You guys, let me explain why Tulsi Gabbard was there, right? So this is a compilation clip. It's a couple minutes long, and it's worth watching. It's worth watching every minute of it, okay? It's worth watching every minute of it. I am old school. Right. When I was in college, I got liberalized. I got progressivized. I was always pretty liberal, pretty progressive growing up. But in college, policy-wise, with a few exceptions, I figured I aligned more with the Democrats than I did with the Republicans. And that was because some big topics that the Republicans pushed, aka war in the Middle East, I was so opposed to that I was willing to bite the bullet on certain policies on the left that I didn't agree with. Okay. And one of the things about being on the left was it used to be, right? This is where the Joe Rogans of the world and the Bill Mayers was like, we seek truth over fiction, aka they were just rejecting their like Christian cultural heritage. But point is, I was always concerned about election machines, and I was concerned about foreign hacking. Republicans were never concerned about this. It was just kind of a Democrat thing that, you would hear about. And let me explain how strong it was in the Democrat bloodstream that elections were rigged. And their idea was that Republicans couldn't get elected if it wasn't rigged. So this is a compilation of Democrats, prominent Democrats, who prior to Donald Trump coming down the escalator were raising serious concerns about the election machines.
Virginia just stopped using touchscreen computer voting because it's so vulnerable.
Right.
We need to look at all the voting machines. Every Secretary of State needs to be, assisted in making sure that they are not being hacked and attacked.
I continue to think that our voting machines are too vulnerable.
Researchers have repeatedly demonstrated that ballot recording machines and other voting systems are susceptible to tampering.
Even hackers with limited prior knowledge, tools, and resources are able to breach voting machines in a matter of minutes.
In 2018, electronic voting machines in Georgia and Texas deleted votes for certain candidates or switched votes from one candidate to another.
The biggest seller of voting machines is doing something that violates Cybersecurity 101, directing that you install remote access software, which would make a machine like that, a magnet for fraudsters and hackers.
These voting machines can be hacked quite easily.
You could easily hack into them. It makes it seem like all these states are doing different things, but in fact, 3 companies are controlling this.
It is the individual voting machines that pose some of the greatest risks.
There are a lot of states that are dealing with antiquated machines, right, which are vulnerable to being hacked.
Workers were able to easily hack into an electronic voting machine. It was possible to switch votes.
43% of American voters use voting machines that researchers have found have serious security flaws, including backdoors.
We know how vulnerable now our systems were. I know the hackathon that took place last year, where virtually every machine was broken into fairly quickly.
I actually held a demonstration for my colleagues here at the Capitol, where we brought in folks who, before our eyes, hacked election machines, those that are being used in many states.
Aging systems also frequently rely on unsupported software like Windows XP in 2000, which may not receive regular security patches and are thus more vulnerable to the latest methods of cyber attack.
In a close presidential election, they just need to hack one swing state, or maybe 1 or 2, or maybe just a few counties in one swing state.
I'm very concerned that you could have a hack that finally went through. You have 21 states that were hacked into. They didn't find out about it for a year.
Right now, we have over a dozen states that either don't have any backup paper ballots or only have them partially. You think that our adversaries don't know what those states are? Of course they know what those states are. And if we have a close election, in the general election, in a presidential race, and one state's outstanding, and their ballot boxes gets hacked into, their elections get hacked into, we will have absolutely no backup. Stalin was unconcerned about the vote. After all, he explained, he said that who voted was completely unimportant. What was extraordinarily important, in his words, was who would count the votes and how.
We do know that one of his friends has purchased Dominion. So it's going to be really important for us to educate all states that we can to make sure that their Secretary of States are like, we don't want the Dominion machines. Because I personally believe that that ally purchased Dominion so that he could potentially play with the machines, because we know that they're trying to cheat by changing the lines for the midterms. And I think that they're trying to solidify their cheat potentially with the voting machines.
There are some tax experts in Silicon Valley with whom I have met who say that, maybe what they'll do this next time is to really disrupt the actual election, shut down the servers that you send results to, interfere with the operation of voting machines, because still too many of them are linked to the internet. So we are still very vulnerable.
43% of American voters use voting machines that researchers have found have serious security flaws, including backdoors. These companies are accountable to no one. They won't answer basic questions about their cybersecurity practices, and the biggest companies won't answer any questions at all. 5 states have no paper trail, and that means there is no way to prove the numbers the voting machines put out are legitimate. So much for Cybersecurity 101.
That is a great montage clip, right? Democrat after Democrat, prominent Democrat after prominent Democrat is telling you that the election machines are vulnerable. Not one of those people was a Republican. Okay, now I can't get my camera to turn on. This is a problem. There we go. I think I got it. Why am I not on the camera? Come on, thing. Do it. Holy smokes, you guys. This is they're the ones that sowed the seed. Now it's not possible to rig elections. They're the ones that sowed the seed that it was possible to rig elections, and then they quickly tried to throw some Roundup on their weed garden as soon as Donald Trump came down the escalator. Elections are going to be secure. We're going to hack them ourselves. That's what they did. Oh my gosh. Why will my camera not turn on? This is nuts. This is so frustrating. Rumble, you are failing me today, Mr. Rumble Studio. Hello, what is the deal here? Sorry, guys. Who knows what the deal is? Come on, camera, turn on. There we go. I don't know. I had to unplug the camera, plug it back in. This doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, so the machines can be hacked. Andrew McCabe is super concerned about Tulsi Gabbard's presence there. If the machines were hacked, it is unlikely that the machines were hacked inside of Fulton County. Okay, so jurisdictionally, a vote is made inside of the county. A registrant is made inside of the county. So all of that is going to fall under county jurisdiction, which would then fall under state jurisdiction. So the ballots themselves are Fraser Walmart camera. Yeah, exactly. Which, by the way, this is the same camera I bought last year. And last year I paid $179 for the camera, and I just paid $59 for it at Walmart. Exact same camera, 1 year. So yeah, go figure. And when I went into Walmart yesterday, they had 32-inch flat screen TVs for $67. I think China is blowing out the doors right now. I think they are trying to raise all the capital they can raise, and they're getting rid of all their backup inventory because there was an 83-inch or 93-inch TV. It was huge. It was bigger than the 85-inch I have over my fireplace. It was a huge TV, and it was like $360. I was like, dude, TVs are going to be free here pretty soon, just like the buses. We can hear you at least. But can you see me, Pony Boy? Can you see me? That's the real question. I think I'm back. Yeah, you have gremlins in your system today. Yeah, seriously, I have gremlins in my system today. Okay. So jurisdictionally, the ballots are going to fall under state jurisdiction. Okay. But the election machines, if the machine is not hacked inside of Fulton County with a direct connection to Fulton County, the moment that internet signal, even if they were in Fulton County, and that internet signal crosses a state line and it comes back, because the internet kind of does that, right? That becomes wire fraud, or there's different phrases for it, but essentially you're using the interstate system to commit fraud. So it immediately becomes federal jurisdiction. On top of that, the likelihood of a hack being a foreign interference, given what we know about Dominion and Serbia, of course Tulsi Gabbard would be involved, but these guys want to deny that. Mark Warner, who was a co-chair and a chair at one point or another of the Intelligence Committee, along with Marco Rubio and others, is also terrified about Tulsi Gabbard's involvement.
Reinforced to all of your listeners and viewers is that Tulsi Gabbard over this last year has literally taken apart what was called the Foreign Malign Influence Center, the center inside the intelligence community that was supposed to look at potential voter interference. Because again, she's still been an election denier. She is a sycophant that Donald Trump, the speculation, at least up here on the Hill, is that, she's done such a dreadful job that she's been excluded from most of the national security activities of the last couple of months. She's never been up here to brief, on Venezuela, Iran, or Greenland, you name it. And maybe this is some feeble attempt to get back in the good graces of her boss, Donald Trump, and to feed into his obsession about losing the 2020 election. That is at least some of the speculation up here.
That is the speculation. And why is that the speculation? Tulsi Gabbard's over the director of national intelligence, all the different intelligence agencies. I think there's like 27 of them. She's kind of the bottleneck for all of them, right? Her department. She's the one that ties them all together. So she hasn't been participating in intelligence stuff. Let's think about that. Well, could it be because you guys leak? Could it be because then you guys would know what they're looking at and what plans they're making, right? When I go through the list of reasons why she wouldn't be briefing them and participating, low on that list is that she's on Donald Trump's bad side. Very low on that list is that she's on Donald Trump's bad side. It's probably more the other. She's doing exactly what Donald Trump needs. And one of those things is don't show your hand. Don't tip your cards. Dan Bongino went into the FBI and he sat in the deputy director's chair, the number 2 in charge of the entire FBI. Presumably, Dan Bongino would have need-to-know access on every single case in the FBI that he wanted to look at, specifically opening up and looking into this grand conspiracy case, all the crimes, collusion, and conspiracy that happened all the way going back to when Donald Trump came down the escalator. And Dan Bongino was on the Sean Hannity show as he's getting ready to return to podcasting. I don't even know if he's back or not yet, but he was on the Sean Hannity show. And I know there's a lot of anger and frustration from conservatives about Dan Bongino, that he's a fake, he's a fraud, he didn't do what he was supposed to do. I don't want to hear any of it, okay? You're not him. You didn't go into the belly of the beast. You didn't see what he saw, okay? So let's just let the story play out. For all we know, he was absolutely instrumental in what he did in the FBI, and now he's going to come out and he's going to share the truth, and his podcast is going to be popular, and he'll be a hero when the story's over. So let the story play out. But doesn't mean we can't criticize him from time to time when we want to, because we reserve that right. However, I think this is really revealing, and it kind of mirrors a tweet that he put out quite a while ago saying we can't live like this as a constitutional republic. Well, now we understand the context behind that. So listen to what he says as he was digging into this evidence from the grand conspiracy.
Reading through some stuff that you can only read in the office, and it just involved basically the collusion hoax, Crossfire Hurricane, as it went by, and the various other spinoffs. And when you read from the inside, Sean, when you see the details of what these just absolute animals did to President Trump and the barriers that broke down and the guardrails, it was, I mean, I'm not shocked often, Sean. I'm really not. I'm not, again, I'm not trying to put on some faux set of armor. I'm just not shocked often. I've lived 1,000 lifetimes between the Secret Service, the NYPD, running for office, TV shows, and all this other stuff. Just reading through it and seeing it in detail for the first time all put together, you can run a republic like this. You can't. Wow. You absolutely cannot. It was just stunning at how all these guardrails broke down at the exact same time, and nobody there. Thank God there wasn't, it was and still is a long-ranging investigation into this stuff, because it's just frightening how no one thought to speak up and say, hey, man, not only is this wrong, this is like demonic. This is evil stuff.
This is evil stuff. Not only is it wrong, it's demonic. And nobody did anything about it. I have been criticized by people close to me that I love that when I got back from prison, I was kind of anti-cop, and that sometimes when I would go on my rants, I would be a little bit, acting like cops are the bad guys. I had this conversation with Frank when I was on the Quite Frankly podcast. Welcome, Franklies, if any of you have joined us. And one of the things he said before we went live in studio, and we only had a couple minutes before we went live, but one of the things he said is, we agree with the current mission of ICE, right? And he says, but they're still feds. And I was like, yes, they're still stormtroopers. They're still Roman soldiers. They're still going to do whatever they're told to do by whoever's writing their paycheck. And I talked about this, how jurisdictionally this becomes a problem because some cops have their allegiance and their paycheck from a county or a city, and they're going to do what their mayor says because that's the chain of command. That's the oath they took. So these people in the FBI who took an oath to the Constitution, which you and I somehow think creates a bulwark against demonic evil inside the government, but it doesn't, because the entire concept of back the blue did not originate from people like me and you. Oh no, it originated from the officers themselves. That back the blue was the idea that one officer is going to back up other officers. And that backing up other officers extends to backing up their malfeasance, their negligence, their mistakes, and everything in between. I remember one time when I was in prison, there was, we have to do what's called standing count. So multiple times a day, you have to go to your bunk. You have to stand there silently while they come around and count you. This is how they make sure nobody goes missing from prison. They do this a couple times a day, like every couple hours. And they even do it in the middle of the night, but then it's not a standing count. Like at midnight, 3 a.m., they will actually come in and count you in your bed. So you get flashlights in your face and stuff like that. It's actually really horrible. It sucks. I wrote an essay about it, about the clanking chains. It was like an alarm clock. They do their rounds and their chains would make so much noise it'd wake you up. So anyways, we had to do this standing count. And somewhere on the other side of the cell block, some Hispanic, was moving during standing count. Who knows what he was doing? Getting something out of his locker, sitting down on his bed. I don't know. Doesn't matter. But for whatever reason, it set this female officer off, and she didn't like that he was moving around. So she completed her count, and then as punishment, she put us on lockdown, the entire block. Right. I stood silently. I had no idea. Why are we on lockdown? You're on lockdown. Why? Because somebody wasn't standing count. Now, group punishment is forbidden in the BOP. Okay. Group punishment is always forbidden in the Bureau of Prisons. They're not supposed to do that. But for it's starting to sound more and more like Satan's little season theory is true. Yeah, seriously. Right. You're not supposed to do that. But they do it regularly, and they just justify it for one reason or another. So we're on lockdown. And at one point, I got a chance. I can't remember why, but for whatever reason, I got called down to the CO's office. And it was after the shift change had happened. So presumably, when the shift change happened, the new guard would let us out. And the reason this was significant was because when you're on lockdown, you can't make phone calls, you can't get on the computer, you can't do any of that stuff. Like you can't communicate with home or do any of your normal evening routine. So we were on lockdown, so we figured when the shift changed, we would come off lockdown, because sometimes that would be what would happen. One guard would put us in lockdown, the next guard would let us out. Well, the next guard wouldn't let us out. And when I ended up in the office for whatever reason, I got called down there and then I had to go back. I can't even remember why, but I went down there and I said, hey, are we going to come off shift change? And he goes, no, I've got to keep you guys on lockdown till tomorrow. And I go, why? He says, oh, because she wanted it. Well, why? Well, because in her report, and he's telling me this. Well, because in her report, she wrote that, everybody in the whole block was disturbing. I'm like, but it was just one guy over there. And he goes, I know, but I got to back the blue. And that's when it hit me. I was like, oh, this is what back the blue means. So presumably the entire FBI, in some false sense of virtue, thought, oh, we'll back the blue, right? If the 7th floor at the FBI thinks they've seen the evidence and they think they have cause to try to get Donald Trump out of office, or if the 7th floor of the FBI is telling us that Donald Trump is a Russian agent, then it must be true. We've got to back the blue. We've got to go with what they say. And that's the danger in all of this. That's the danger in all of this, is that we've taken away from certain individuals their capacity to make decisions. And then the way the system is set up is whistleblowers and people who try to speak up, their lives get destroyed, right? So it disincentivizes the truth from ever coming out. And instead we live in a culture of back the blue, which leads me to believe, and this is why I say, there are no good cops. All cops are bad cops. ACAB, the thing Antifa always says. And I don't mean that sincerely. I don't mean that every individual cop is a bad person at all. Their purpose in being a cop is usually very altruistic. But what happens is when you cover for crimes as an officer, then we end up in this all cops are bad cops. And the simple reasoning is this: because if all cops were not bad cops and there were a good cop, there wouldn't be any bad cops because they would arrest the bad cops. So and this is reinforced by a conversation I had with an FBI agent, just a run-of-the-mill line agent in 2020, where he said that same thing. He said, and we were quietly walking in a hike with no cell phones, but he quietly said, or not quietly, but he said, I can observe all the crimes I want, but I cannot open a case on James Comey. And that was a specific example he gave. What would I do with that case? I was like, that's it. That's why. The back the blue mentality, right? All cops are bad cops because if there were any good cops, there wouldn't be bad cops. There are no laws. There's only cops. There's only enforcement. And enforcement leads to the narrative, right? Enforcement enforces the narrative. And that's what we've been living through, is we've been living through these tugging narratives. And one side, the left, has had the enforcement. They've had the ability to slam that narrative down the throat of unwitting Americans who aren't paying attention. But for those of us peasants who do pay attention, we're way ahead on this story. Why Tulsi Gabbard was in Fulton County is no surprise to us, because all along we've suspected that there was foreign interference in these elections, that our elected leaders colluded with foreign officials in order to overthrow the 2020 election. And if they did that, they've likely overthrown other elections. Now, Patrick Byrne, who has been at the center of all of this, gathering information, going on catamaran yachts down to pick up whistleblowers from Cuba, and on and on and on his story goes. It's been an incredible story. And he's been proven right time and time again. He was on with Emerald Robinson, who's probably the one reporter that has covered this study from bookend to bookend. And she had him on, and he revealed a couple new bits of information and explained exactly what they're going to find when they look at these ballots and the machines that they took yesterday out of Fulton County.
I've been given permission to tell you something big too, by the way, but I don't want to intercept your questions. Go ahead.
Well, look, now my next question is going to be, what do you have big to share with us, Patrick Byrne? Because honestly, you drop these bombs and I never know what you're going to have to share with us. What's today?
Well, I've been given permission to share this, and I got to do a little bit of dolphin speak. In these computers, there's something called a DLL. It's a library. Think of it like in a mechanic shop. There's one master toolbox, and there's 8 different mechanics that go over and take out the tool that they need at any given moment. Well, in these computer systems, there's all these different programs, but there's one toolbox of a set of things that they all access. And it is our opinion, and the opinion of any knowledgeable computer scientist, I don't think anyone would dispute, it turns out, that if once the machine is certified, there's any change in that toolbox, if anyone adds any new tools, the whole system loses its certification. I don't think there's anyone, even in the Dominion side of things, who would dispute that. I've been given permission to reveal to you that we've actually secretly obtained 5 hard drive images from 2020. The bad guys don't know which 5, but we can tell you in each one of them we have found an average of 500 changes to the DLLs after certification and as many as 1,000, any one of which violates. All will agree that any one change violates the certification. There's an average of 500. And my guess is there's some government computer scientists opening up the Fulton County hard drives this morning, and they're going to be finding records that show from 2020 that show there were hundreds of changes to the DLL, to that library, to that toolbox after certification, even one of which throws the thing out of cert, because that's where you put it's the most important thing to own if you're going to be putting in bugs. It's So I'm very confident that's what they're finding this morning in Fulton County, Georgia. The government scientists somewhere nowhere else, which means the whole thing it's so illegal. I don't know if I'm getting across how bad that is. That's really bad. All will agree that that's really bad.
Well, that makes perfect sense. They're in the machines after certification, tampering with them in a way that could flip the votes. And we'll go back to what J. Alex Halderman himself said, right? Who is a leftist. He testified that as part of a case in Georgia, right, where he got access to a machine himself, that you can flip these votes. You can manipulate the election data in such a way that you can do it without a trace. That's Curling versus Raffensperger, the report that he did as a part of that case.
This is so it's hard to convey how ugly this is. What I just told you about that those 500 average 500 changes to the machine after certification means the whole thing has been built to there could be scripts that change things and other scripts that teach the machine how to erase itself and erase the tracks and all this stuff. But you only get to it if you get to the actual hard drive and just not reading their reports. That's why these guys have been fighting teeth, toes, and fingernails against ever letting anyone do what President Trump what they finally did last night and what Tulsi did last night. She's really going to go down as the hero of the hour in the country, because she's had the backbone to stand up and do stuff that other people, I don't want to name names, other people could have, but she did it.
She really has. She really has. And I know for a fact that she has dug her heels in. And she has faced obstructions, right? There are subversive elements of the IC of which she is now a part. She oversees it, who have tried to keep her from doing these investigations. I think her presence there yesterday evening was very important. We'd hoped we would hear from her. There was some rumor that we would, but it seems she's keeping it close to the vest for now. And that's probably wise, as you said, because there's so much going on behind the scenes. And you're basically telegraphing to us that the government, which would probably be in her office, right? Her department, it would be looking into these drives and seeing exactly what you're talking about with the manipulation. Patrick, you and I have been talking about, it's interesting this happens because you and I had been doing these segments talking about places where there had been provable fraud. There was already a wealth of evidence, and Georgia was one of those. Where do you see the next shoe dropping?
Where do you see the shoe dropping? It's probably going to be up in Pennsylvania, and then it's going to go over to Michigan, and then it's going to go to Wisconsin, and then it's going to go to Arizona. All the swing states, the ones that had the Joe Biden bump. It'll be really interesting. So as you can see, Tulsi Gabbard is involved. They already know what they're going to find on those machines because they have 5 different machines. And what he's basically telling you there is what Tina Peters did was one of the 5. There were 4 other whistleblowers like Tina Peters who brought machines forward that obviously haven't been caught. Like he said, they don't know what the 5 are. I presume one of them is the Tina Peters. Maybe there's 6 with hers. Who knows? So Jonathan Turley was on with Laura Ingraham, and he's starting to sound reasonable. Okay. He's starting to sound reasonable in how this should be looked at. They got a judge's warrant. And by the way, this judge is not connected to Donald Trump, and he's pretty much a lefty judge. So he participates in all kinds of, defendant get out of jail free cards and, public defender funds and stuff like that, bail reform funds, things like that. So he's not a right-wing conservative by any means. And he signed the warrant for this.
Or is Jonathan Turley, constitutional law expert, Fox News contributor. All right, Jonathan, you heard this all day from Democrats and others. It's 6 years later, machine recount, 2 recounts, a machine count, confirming the results of the election. a lot of eye rolling by Democrats and media types. So what's the point in going back?
Well, that's a very good question, but we do have a court order here. So a judge found that there was probable cause to allow the seizure of this material. And that's just not given for any reason. The judge had to conclude that there was a basis for this. We don't know what caused this search. We will have to see. You know, when the election was occurring, many of us said at the time that we did not see evidence of mass fraud, and that certainly is still the case. But there was a lot of frustration by people who were going to court to try to get access to these ballots. They were largely refused in many states. And so this is a very significant step that these are now in control of the FBI and can be reviewed. Now, whether there's anything there, it's hard to tell. We have to see what this judge felt was a basis for this search, and it's quite an extensive search at that.
So Jonathan Turley's like, hey, if a judge found probable cause, you kind of got to roll with it. Yeah, you do. Because guess what? Those judge's orders, they cash. Those checks cash, which means they can use force to enforce that warrant, which is why the Fulton County just had to sit back and let it happen. They couldn't do anything about it. I'm sure there were panicked phone calls to the governor. Can you call out the National Guard? Can you tell the state troopers to come out and stop them? And the governor was totally hand-tied. This lady right here, I cannot remember, Katie Fang. Katie Fang is a leftist, and she is looking at this too, and she's, again, in panic mode. Listen to the panic.
We do know they took the originals. They took the originals of this information.
Really?
They being the FBI agents.
Stinkers.
So why should you care? Like I said, because number one, Trump is clearly trying to get in front of the 2026 midterms. But number two, because the Trump DOJ has been trying to get this information and has been stalled out effectively through the litigation process by Fulton County. So the search warrant yesterday was an end run around litigation that they've been losing in Fulton County in Georgia. We do know they took the originals.
So that's their perspective, that this was an end run around the litigation to try to continue the conspiracy theories that 2020 was stolen. Fortunately for us, yesterday on the floor, the Senate floor in Georgia, Georgia Senator Greg Dolezal laid it all out. He laid out exactly why they got a criminal warrant, what they're searching for, and all the irregularities that they're looking into. It's worth every minute. This is, up until the DOJ or someone gives a press conference, this is a really good conglomeration of all the things that Georgia has found through their 5 years of hearings, committee hearings, whistleblowers, lawsuits, et cetera, et cetera. So while you hear everybody on TV saying it's an end run, this is about the midterms, of course it's about the midterms. It's about preventing this from happening in the midterms, right? These are the things that they're ignoring while saying that this is a baseless search warrant.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to remind everyone what happened yesterday as it relates to the actual fact pattern of law. A warrant was issued by a magistrate judge based on probable cause after evidence was submitted. Not a Trump-appointed judge, a magistrate judge. That is the way that the law enforcement process works in America. But we have heard repeatedly that everything was perfect with 2020. In fact, I think we probably at this point could trademark the most secure election in American history. What qualifications we use to measure that, I have no idea. But let's go back to what actually happened in 2020 if we're going to have the conversation. Drop boxes invented out of thin air, nowhere in Georgia law. Mobile voting units moving through Fulton County to 80% Democrat precincts, 81% Democrat precincts to be precise. Nowhere envisioned in Georgia law. 6.8 million absentee ballot request forms with a first-class stamp sent to every registered voter in the state of Georgia. Nowhere envisioned in Georgia law. If you count the same ballots 3 times, in theory, you should get numbers that match. But that didn't happen either. Let's talk about the recount that happened. 3,930 double scanned ballots in Fulton County alone. Thousands of those have been confirmed by the state election board. Governor Kemp actually raised the concerns of the Moncla-Rossi report, and we now know that there were double scanned ballots. But even after the ballots were double scanned in Fulton County, did the numbers match on the second recount? Nope. They were still off by 850 ballots. Not one person here can answer the question of how that happened, and that is a legitimate question. We know that ballot images were deleted. We know that test ballots were included in the recount process, and we have that confirmed. But I want to take just a minute and talk about what the Democrats did in response to legitimate questions over the 2020 election. A former constituent of mine, Derek Somerville, former FBI agent, ran data analysis along with another gentleman named Mark Davis. And remember the 6.8 million absentee ballot request forms that were sent out? They had a first-class stamp. So that means if you filed the national change of address form, that was automatically forwarded to your new address. And they identified reasonable cause to question the validity of 39,141 of those ballots that were cast. They knew that 160 people had been registered to vote from a single UPS store. 2,138 people had been registered to vote from one church in Fulton County. 1,391 had been registered to vote from a shuttered 1,000 square foot building in Fulton County. Lest you think Fulton County has cleaned up their voter rolls, today, thousands of people are registered to vote in Fulton County at UPS stores, storage units, pack mails, homeless shelters that haven't been open for over 5 years. The Fulton County voter rolls have been and continue to be a mess. But when Derek Somerville and Mark Davis followed the law and filed objections to those voters, what did the Democrats do? Well, Stacey Abrams sued them in federal court, and they won. Not Stacey Abrams, but Somerville and Davis won. Judge Jones, not a Republican judge, ruled in their favor. What have we learned since then about those 39,000 voters? 12,000 of them have been removed from the voter rolls because Somerville and Davis were correct that they were no longer eligible to vote. 9,500 have updated their address to a new address outside of Fulton County, proving once again that Somerville and Davis were correct and those people were ineligible to vote. Ultimately, 84% of the votes of the eligibility that Somerville and Davis challenged were proven to have been invalid voters in the 2020 election. So let's stop this charade of the most perfect, most secure election in history. But more importantly, and I would agree with my colleagues on this, let's look forward to the future elections, and it's darn near past time for Fulton County to clean up their voter rolls.
Darn near past time for them to clean up their voter rolls. All right, let's see if I can get my camera to turn on. I kicked my camera while I was watching that. Moved over. I don't know if you guys saw that or not. So that is really what Fulton County and Georgia has been dealing with. Those things have been pretty much totally unaddressed. And they're critical. And seeing the ballots is going to determine if ballots were multiple counted, if there were fraudulent ballots, and then, of course, seeing the machine is going to verify if the machine actually did the voting, and then they just used ballots to try to backload that to try to validate their count. But like he said, if you count ballots 3 times and it's the same ballots, you'd think you'd get the same results. That didn't happen. I posted this today on my X, and I reposted it with the caption, obtuse. I find these gentlemen on this podcast on this topic to be obtuse. Okay, this is the Two-Way podcast. I play them from time to time, and these guys are like deep political people that are connected to the parties, and they try to play this moderate middle ground. People have their leaning left or right, okay? So when these guys are talking, I'm like, who are you? And where have you been the last 4 years? I cannot tell for the life of me if they're just speaking to an audience that is generally, skeptical of any kind of conspiracy theory, that everything is kind of on the surface, or if these guys really are so dumb that they have dismissed significant evidence like you just heard this whole time. Listen to the way they talk about this warrant and statute of limitations, and I have no idea what they could possibly be looking for.
Raids Fulton County election office seeking ballots from Trump's 2020 loss. The president's alluded to this. Lindsey Graham and others have talked about it and basically said, all you who doubted that Georgia was stolen from the president in 2020 are about to be proven wrong. I don't understand how the statute of limitations on any of this stuff could still be in play because it's now 6 years old. But Larry, I don't want to go on forever on this, but what is this about as far as you can tell?
It seems to be connected to the statement at the beginning of December about the fact that there were upwards to 300,000 ballots that lacked the required signature on the machine receipt that you're supposed to have with 2 witnesses. Those ballots were counted. Again, with regard to statute of limitations, this isn't going to change the results, obviously, and we're not going to rewrite history and all that jazz. But I think that there is some interest in getting partly to the truth of what happened, or at least validating many of the concerns that many of us had about how the ballots were handled in Fulton County in particular. But also looking forward, this is to send a message, I think, and a signal to jurisdictions around the country coming up in the next election and certainly the 28th presidential election, that this stuff is going to be looked at. Our elections, frankly, are not really examined much after the fact. There aren't a whole lot of inquiries, and there shouldn't be anything wrong. This is all public information.
But Larry,
there
not by
be anything wrong, and
but
it shouldn't be secret.
Well, but why should it be done by prosecutors? So let someone else do it, but prosecutors shouldn't be auditing our elections.
Well, I think that many requests for these ballots and for audits have been sort of turned away and ignored up until now. I think that's part of the problem.
Okay, but as a 10th Amendment guy and a Mitch McConnell guy on elections, do you really want the federal government telling states how to run their elections?
Oh, in a perfect world, absolutely. So can we go back and get rid of motor voter from the mid-90s where the federal government told states?
You're saying in a perfect world, the states would be in charge of their own elections.
But we don't live in that perfect world and haven't, sadly. So
if you had a bubble cuddle blanket, Larry, you might feel different about the perfection of the world. Kevin, is this going someplace, this thing?
I don't think so. I mean, again, this has been a focal point of the president for years, Fulton County, especially in the drama with Fannie Willis that he still calls out by name. So this is not surprising. The only surprising element to this, I think, is the nature of Tulsi Gabbard, right? Had the DNI, unless there's a foreign interference thing, why is she there? Something that Mark Warner, our ranking member on intelligence, who's a sober kind of guy, ran it with Marco Rubio for a number of years. The Intelligence Committee is like, why the heck is she there? And that grainy photo, I think, was released by Reuters. Yeah. So again, I think there's more questions than answers right now at this point because it is breaking news in the last 24 hours.
So there's more questions than answers at this point. And Mark Warner, he's a reasonable guy. Is he? So for those of you that don't know who Mark Warner is, this is Mark Warner, okay? This is Mark Warner. He's a reasonable guy. Is this a reasonable guy? Mark Warner ties everything together. Everything that's happening. This is all about power. And how do you gain power and achieve power in the United States of America? By winning elections. But what if you're not winning elections? What if you're cheating them? Is that a way to consolidate power and maintain power? Yeah. What if you're game planning out a scenario where people start to get wise to certain parts of your fraud? For example, you can have all the ballots you want and you can have electronic ballots, but one of the things that you will ultimately need is real voters. Because if the two parties finally come together and decide to do something about those machines, you can't outrun indoctrination, and you definitely can't outrun a population that's full of people on public benefit. Here's Mark Warner saying the quiet thing out loud, what they're really concerned about with these ballots and how that ties in with the immigration problem.
And one of the things that I think we need to make sure that is included in any kind of ICE reform is we don't want these roving patrols of ICE agents suddenly showing up at polling stations during primaries or general elections. We may have a major vote in Virginia about redistricting. That's got to be a reform as well. The level of intimidation that the feds could bring on voters all across the country. If it doesn't worry you, it should.
So is that on the table right now?
And one of the
So he's concerned about ICE agents standing outside of polling centers deterring illegals from voting. That's their final line in the sand. So all this panic ties together, which we should really be concerned. At the beginning of the show yesterday, I played the little meme video about how to steal an election, right? Create the virus and get the virus to get people locked inside and all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what, guys? This ran yesterday out of nowhere, right? Fulton County gets raided. The Venezuela president's in prison. He's tied to the election machines. They're deporting illegals. Time to run Plan C.
This is a highly contagious virus between humans, and it's often deadly. The 2 cases of Nipah virus were detected in India in the state of West Bengal, but there are concerns the outbreak could spread. The virus has a fatality rate of 40 to 75%, according to the World Health Organization. So it's deadlier than the COVID virus, and there's no vaccine for Nipah. So authorities in India are taking no chances. At the same time, several airports across Asia, in Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, they're taking steps to screen passengers for any symptoms. Nipah is a zoonotic virus that's transmitted from animals, usually fruit bats. It doesn't spread easily to humans, and it can also come from contaminated food. But when it does, it initially hits like the flu, then worsens, and experts say pneumonia and other respiratory symptoms can develop. But the most serious complication is encephalitis, or inflammation of the brain. The WHO says the fatality rate has a lot to do with the country's capacity to test, trace, and treat those infected. In India, authorities have quarantined nearly 200 people who may have come into contact with the 2 infected. It's the first time in nearly 20 years that India has had cases, but they believe the outbreak is now contained. Still, it's a situation that U.S. health officials are monitoring very closely. The CDC says they're ready to assist if needed.
Rest in peace, anybody who's got Nipah virus, but I'm just saying, it feels very January, February-esque 2020, right? Like, oh, hey, Trump just gave a great State of the Union and he just beat impeachment. And oh my gosh, this guy's going to walk away with the midterms. There's a virus. We're monitoring it closely. Okay. Yes. I mean, here we go again. Oh, let's leave on a funny note, you guys. One last video. Donald Trump is the most hilarious president we've ever had. As he started out his cabinet meeting, he got on a little bit of a comedic role. And after this, we're going to head into private. We got a lot to do in private. I gotta make up some time because I didn't do enough private streaming this month. All right, here's Donald Trump being freaking hilarious.
We are going to ask a couple of people to say a few words, and we're not going to go through the whole table because the last time we had a press conference, it lasted for 3 hours, and some people said he closed his eyes. Look, it got pretty boring. In all fairness, I love these people. But there's a lot of people. It was a little bit on the boring side. But I didn't sleep. I just closed them because I wanted to get the hell out of here. Some of them, I didn't sleep, by the way. I don't sleep much, let me tell you. But, you know, it's funny. Some of them got me in a blink. You know, when you go like, and they took me as at the closed segment of my cycle. And they said he's sleeping. And besides that, Marco, between these two guys, if I was sleeping, they'd be waking me up very fast. They'd be knocking me. Come on, you got to wake up, boss. But no, we've had great meetings. Look, we're the most transparent presidency by far, and I love going around the room, but we're going to pick a few people.
Oh man, that is hilarious. Again, funniest president we've ever had. All right, guys, it's time for me to move over to private, so I'm going to do that right now. Some of you, I'm sure, will stay with me. See you guys. Bye.